It's easy to think our modern medicines just sort of appeared fully formed,
Right.
but the reality is often this amazing long journey, centuries sometimes. Did you know some of today's treatments have roots way back in the Middle Ages? It's wild.
It really is.
Okay, let's unpack this because in this deep dive, we're focusing on metformin. I mean, it's a super common drug for type 2 diabetes.
Oh, absolutely. But it's so much more than just a daily pill for many people. The story behind it connects traditional medicine, how we understand diabetes, and some really surprising twists.
Exactly. And that's what we really want to explore with you today. We're not just going to cover what metformin does right now.
Mhm.
We'll dig into its, well, surprisingly old origins, trace how science figured it out, understand how it actually works in your body, and even touch on some regulatory hurdles and its wider impact.
Yeah, the goal is really to give you a clear, kind of insightful picture of this drug. So you feel properly informed, but hopefully not bogged down in technical stuff.
Right. And to do that, we've looked at, well, a whole range of things.
We have scientific reports on the mechanisms, clinical reviews on how well it works, historical accounts, manufacturing info, even cultural perspectives on managing diabetes,
It's a multifaceted approach, hoping to give a really rich understanding.
hopefully.
So, where does this whole story kick off? It's pretty amazing, actually. We have to go way back. Middle Ages kind of back.
Yeah, to a plant called Galega officinalis.
Goat's rue, right. Or French lilac.
That's the one. Traditional healers back then noticed it seemed to help with symptoms we now link to diabetes, like frequent urination.
And this folk knowledge persisted for hundreds of
It
years.
did. Then, fast forward to the early 20th century, scientists started asking, okay, what in this plant is doing this?
And they found compounds called guanidines.
Yeah, a critical finding. They saw guanidine could lower blood glucose. Big problem,
It's
though.
too toxic.
Exactly. Too toxic for widespread, safe use in people.
Okay, so back to the drawing board, sort of. They looked for safer things in the plant.
Right. And by 1923, they'd identified a less toxic relative called galagine, isoamylene guanidine, technically.
And early human studies looked promising.
They did. It lowered blood sugar in diabetics, but didn't really affect people with normal blood sugar much.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because around the same time, 1922 actually, chemists Werner and Bell synthesized metformin itself, 11-dimethyl-biguanide.
But, and this is a key point, even though they made it early on, it wasn't the focus.
Why not?
Well, the attention initially went to other related compounds, other biguanides, specifically fenformin and buformin.
Ah, because they seem stronger, more potent glucose lower.
They seem to have a more powerful effect, yeah.
Hmm.
So for a while, metformin was kind of forgotten, pushed
Mhm.
aside because these others looked more promising.
Wow, shows how research can take different paths. But something brought biguanides back.
It did, and kind of accidentally. During World War II, a biguanide being tested for malaria.
No way.
Yeah, it was found to have a side effect of lowering blood glucose.
Huh. So that spurred more research.
It inspired a French doctor, Jean Stern, to look specifically at metformin again, but this time for what they called adult-onset diabetes back then.
And his work was key.
Absolutely crucial. In the late 50s, 57, 58, he published studies showing metformin worked. It lowered blood glucose effectively in type 2 diabetes.
And crucially, without the big risks.
Right. Without causing hypoglycemia, that dangerous low blood sugar, or the lactic acidosis buildup that was becoming a concern with fenformin and buformin in some studies.
So that safety profile was the big difference.
It seemed to be, based on his early work, and that led to metformin being introduced in the UK and other parts of Europe starting in 1958.
But, and this might surprise people, it took ages to get approved in the US.
It did, not until 1994 for FDA approval, and it hit the market there in 95.
Why the long delay?
Mostly lingering concerns, worries about lactic acidosis and maybe cardiovascular effects, largely based on the negative experiences with those other biguanides, fenformin and buformin.
Right. So the history of the whole drug class kind of cast a shadow.
It really shows how rigorous and sometimes slow the regulatory process can be, and how past experiences, good and bad, influence things.
Okay, so quite a backstory to become the standard it is today. Speaking of which, let's get into its clinical uses now. I mean, it's fundamental for type 2 diabetes treatment.
Oh, absolutely. It's the recommended first-line therapy for most people diagnosed with P2DM, and for very good reasons.
Its main job is lowering blood sugar, right? Both
Right.
fasting and after meals.
Correct. It lowers both your basal or fasting glucose and your postprandial glucose, the spike after you eat.
It does this in a few ways. The liver is a big part of it.
That's the main one, yes.
Yeah.
It works primarily by inhibiting the liver's production of glucose. That process is called gluconeogenesis.
So it tells the liver's backup glucose factory to slow down production.
That's a good way to put it. But it also helps in other ways. It reduces how much glucose you absorb from your food in the gut,
Okay.
and it improves how your body's cells, especially muscle cells, respond to insulin and take up glucose from the blood.
And a key point you mentioned earlier, when used alone for type 2 diabetes, it generally doesn't cause hypoglycemia.
That's a major advantage, yeah. Unlike some other diabetes drugs, the risk of dangerously low blood sugar is very low with metformin monotherapy.
And the benefits seem to go beyond just sugar control. We hear about weight, maybe lipids.
That's right. Research suggests it can contribute to modest weight reduction, or at least weight neutrality, which is helpful. It can also help improve lipid profiles, lowering LDL cholesterol and triglycerides. And there's evidence suggesting it plays a role in preventing vascular complications.
Thinking about bigger studies, the UKPDS comes to mind.
Yes, the UK Prospective Diabetes Study back in 1998 was landmark. It provided strong evidence that metformin not only improved glucose control, but also reduced the risk of cardiovascular disease and death from any cause, particularly in overweight patients. This was seen in those with normal or only mildly reduced kidney function at the time.
And newer studies seem to back this up.
They do. For instance, the RIAC Italian study from 2013 suggested metformin was linked to a lower rate of cardiovascular disease across different age groups and different levels of kidney function compared to other diabetes treatments.
Okay, that brings up the kidney function point. That's been a bit of a moving target, hasn't it?
It has. For a long time, there was a lot of caution, even contraindication, for using metformin if someone had kidney problems because of that lactic acidosis concern.
Right. But that thinking has shifted.
Yes, significantly. Current guidelines now generally recommend that metformin can often be continued, although maybe at a reduced dose, in patients with moderate kidney impairment. We're talking a GFR, that measure of kidney filtration, between 30 and 59 milliliters per minute.
And the rationale for that change?
Well, there are a couple things. One is recognizing that stopping metformin might mean losing its potential cardiovascular benefits in a group already at higher risk.
Okay.
And two, switching to alternatives, like insulin or sulfonylureas, might actually increase the risk of other problems, particularly hypoglycemia.
That makes sense, weighing the different risks.
Exactly. There was even one retrospective study in 2015 looking at patients with severe stage 5 kidney disease who were on specific anemia drugs. Even though metformin was technically contraindicated, the patients in that study who were taking it didn't show a statistically significant increase in metabolic acidosis risk compared to those who weren't.
Interesting. But still caution needed.
Oh, definitely. The guidelines still generally say stop metformin if the GFR drops below 30. The risk does increase with more severe kidney disease, but it highlights this evolving picture and the need for individual assessment.
It's not just for established diabetes either. What about prediabetes?
Yes, that's another area. Several big analyses in the American Diabetes Association suggest metformin can be considered, alongside lifestyle changes, of course.
Lifestyle first, though.
Lifestyle is definitely more effective, and the primary recommendation. But metformin might be an option to help lower the risk of progressing to full type 2 diabetes, especially for certain people, maybe those under 60, those with a very high BMI, or women with a history of gestational diabetes.
And the research story continues, looking beyond type 2.
Right. There are several emerging areas that are quite exciting, actually.
Like what?
Well, gestational diabetes, for one. Some studies, like ones from Canada and Australia, suggest metformin can lead to better glucose control during pregnancy, reduce the need for insulin injections, and maybe even lower the rate of C-sections compared to placebo or insulin.
Are there any downsides there?
There are some considerations. Some studies noted potentially lower birth weights and maybe a slightly higher chance of babies being born small for their gestational age. So it's still being actively studied and discussed.
What else? Type 1 diabetes.
Potentially as an add-on therapy for people with type 1 who are also overweight or obese. The idea is to help manage the insulin resistance that can sometimes develop alongside type 1.
And then there's the cancer connection we sometimes hear about.
Yes, that's a huge area of research. Right now, large reviews haven't definitively concluded that metformin reduces overall cancer risk across the board. The results are a bit mixed, maybe inconclusive.
But research is ongoing.
Very much so. Scientists are looking at its effects on specific types of tumors, in specific tissues, and even in rare genetic syndromes like Li-Fra-Many that dramatically increase cancer risk.
And probably the most talked about potential use, aging.
Ah, yes, the anti-aging potential.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buzz around that.
What's the thinking there?
Well, studies in model organisms, like the tiny worm C. elegans, show metformin seems to influence several fundamental pathways linked to aging.
Like what kind of pathways?
Things like insulin signaling, a major growth pathway called mTOR, the function of mitochondria, the cell's powerhouses, an energy sensor called AMPK. It also seems to reduce oxidative stress, DNA damage, inflammation.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. It also impacts processes like autophagy, which is cellular cleanup, and cellular senescence, sort of like cell aging. It even affects the gut microbes in worms, though we don't have clear evidence for that specific effect in humans yet.
So the idea is it might gently nudge these core aging processes in a healthier direction?
That's the hope, based on these preclinical studies. Obviously, translating that to humans is a whole other ballgame, and large clinical trials like TAME, targeting aging with metformin, are designed to investigate this.
Fascinating. It sounds like this old drug might still have some new tricks. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of how it works, the mechanism.
Okay, so as we said, the main glucose-lowering effect is shutting down excess glucose production in the liver, inhibiting gluconeogenesis.
But there are indirect things happening too,
Yes, it's becoming clear that indirect effects contribute significantly. For instance, fat breakdown in adipose tissue releases glycerol and fatty acids.
which can fuel glucose production in the liver.
Exactly. And while metformin's direct effect on fat cells isn't its main job, the overall improvement in insulin sensitivity it causes can indirectly influence these processes. Its main site of action, where it really accumulates and works, is the liver.
Right. Now, when you take a metformin pill, how much actually gets into your system?
The oral bioavailability is around 50 to 60%, so about half of it gets absorbed,
Where does that happen?
primarily in the small intestine. From there, it enters the bloodstream and goes straight to the liver via the portal vein.
And then it spreads out.
Then it gets distributed to other tissues like muscle and fat, where it helps them become more sensitive to insulin and take up glucose more effectively.
How does your body get rid of it? Does it get broken down?
No, that's interesting. It's not metabolized. It's excreted unchanged by the kidneys. They actively secrete it into the urine through tubules. That's the main way out.
Okay. And you mentioned the gut microbiota earlier.
Yes, that's a relatively newer area of understanding. Research increasingly suggests metformin significantly alters the composition and function of the gut bacteria.
And that might contribute to how it works.
It might. It could contribute to both the glucose-lowering effects and potentially some of the common gastrointestinal side effects people experience, like diarrhea or nausea.
Right. Those are fairly common. Now, we see different versions like GL-phage versus GL-phage XR. What's the deal there?
Okay, so geolucophage is the standard immediate release IR version. The drug gets released pretty quickly after you swallow the pill.
And XR, extended release.
Exactly. Geolucophage XR is designed to release the medication more slowly over a longer period.
What difference does that make in the body?
It generally means you get a lower peak concentration of the drug in your blood that's called Cmax, and it takes longer to reach that peak that's Tmax compared to the immediate release.
But you still absorb the same total amount.
Pretty much, yes. The overall absorption, we call the AUC, or area under the curve, is similar if you compare equivalent daily doses. Like 2,000 milligrams of XR once daily gives similar total exposure to 1,000 milligrams of IR twice daily.
And it doesn't build up over time with the XR.
Studies suggest it doesn't accumulate in the plasma with repeated XR dosing, which is good. The idea behind XR is often to improve gastrointestinal tolerance and allow for once daily dosing.
So a smoother ride, potentially fewer side effects for some people.
That's the aim.
We also saw GL Umetza mentioned. Is that another type of XR?
It is, yes. It's another modified release formulation, but it uses a different delivery technology involving polymers to release the drug primarily in the upper GI tract. Different mechanism, same goal of slower release.
Does the way the body handles metformin change much with age or, say, kidney problems?
It can, yes. In older adults, studies generally show that metformin clearance decreases, the body gets rid of it more slowly. The half-life might be longer, and the peak concentration could be higher compared to younger folks.
Mostly due to kidney function declining with age.
Primarily, yes. Age-related changes in renal function are the main driver. And as we discussed, in people with diagnosed renal impairment, the pharmacokinetics definitely change depending on the severity.
Oh, so.
As kidney function, GFR goes down, the drug tends to stick around longer, peak levels, Cmax get higher, and total exposure, AUC, increases because the kidneys just can't clear it as efficiently. There are specific tables showing how these parameters change across different stages of kidney disease.
And liver problems.
Interestingly, there haven't been specific pharmacokinetic studies in people with hepatic insufficiency, so we don't have clear data on how liver problems affect metformin handling.
Okay. What about drug interactions? Things people should be careful about taking alongside metformin.
Absolutely, that's important. Certain drugs can increase the risk of that rare but serious side effect, metformin-associated lactic acidosis.
Which drugs are we talking about?
Generally, drugs that can also impair kidney function, cause major changes in blood pressure or circulation, mess with the body's acid-base balance, or directly interfere with metformin elimination, causing it to build up.
Can you give an example?
Sure, nicotine, a calcium channel blocker used for blood pressure, has been shown to slightly increase metformin Cmax and AUC. More significantly, drugs that inhibit specific transporters in the kidney tubules responsible for secreting metformin.
OCT2 and MATI transporters.
Exactly. Inhibitors of those, like the anti-anginal drug ranolazine, some cancer drugs like vandetanib, the HIV drug dolutegravir, and the older heartburn medication cimetidine. These can reduce metformin clearance.
And that increases risk.
Potentially, yes, by causing metformin levels to rise. The interaction with cimetidine was quite significant in studies. It caused about a 60% increase in peak metformin concentration and a 40% increase in total exposure.
Wow. So definitely important for doctors and pharmacists to check for these interactions.
Crucial. Always need that complete medication list.
Okay, switching gears slightly. How is this stuff actually made? It's easy to just see the pill.
Yeah, the manufacturing is quite large scale. One source, a document about an API active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturing plant.
So making the raw drug powder.
Right. It mentioned storing metformin hydrochloride solid in bags or drums with a potential site capacity of like 100 metric tons. Gives you a sense of the volume.
That's a lot. And then making the actual tablets, like those combination pills.
Right. For something like Actoplus Met XR, which combines metformin with another drug, pioglitazone, it uses specialized tech. They mentioned a SCOIT system single composition osmotic tablet.
What does that mean?
It means they create an extended release core containing the metformin, and then they coat that core with an immediate release layer of the other drug, the pioglitazone.
Clever, like a layered approach in one pill.
Exactly. And we also saw a study looking at the process validation for standard metformin sustained release tablets.
What did that involve? Making sure the process works consistently.
Pretty much. It detailed the steps, dry mixing the ingredients, adding lubricants so the powder flows, compressing it into tablets and packaging. But crucially, it detailed all the quality control checks.
Like what?
Checking the assay is the right amount of drug there. Content uniformity, does each tablet have the same dose? Physical checks, size, shape. Hardness, they need to be strong enough. Friability, they shouldn't crumble easily. And dissolution testing.
How quickly the drug releases.
Right, does it release over time, as expected in the lab test that mimics the body? They had specific acceptance criteria, like hardness needed to be at least 5 kilograms loss, friability no more than 1% loss, and dissolution releasing at least 80% by a certain time point.
So lots of checks along the way. Rigorous quality control is essential.
Absolutely baked into the process.
Now let's talk regulation and maybe controversies. Metformin's been around, but the regulatory view has evolved, right? Especially around lactic acidosis.
It really has. The European Medicines Agency, the EMA, put out a report in 2016 specifically looking at this. They revised the guidance for using metformin in kidney impairment, as we discussed.
And they noted the risk seemed lower than previously thought.
Yes, they highlighted that the risk of fatal lactic acidosis seemed to have declined over time, from maybe around 50% in older data down to less than 20% more recently.
And the cause wasn't always just the metformin itself.
That's what recent studies increasingly suggest. Lactic acidosis, when it happens in people taking metformin, is often strongly linked to underlying acute conditions, things like shock, severe heart failure, sepsis, acute kidney injury. One study found a very high association, like a 9.5 times higher odds, with acute kidney injury.
So metformin might be present, but another serious illness is often the main driver.
That seems to be the current understanding, which has led agencies like the one in Malta, for example, to officially update guidelines allowing use in moderate kidney disease, GFR 3059, with dose adjustments and monitoring, while still keeping it contraindicated below a GFR of 30.
But more recently, there's been another regulatory headache. Impurities.
Ah, yes, the nitrosamine issue. That definitely made headlines.
And DMA, right?
And nitrosodimethylamine, yes. Finding this potential carcinogen as an impurity in some batches of metformin products led to significant concerns and recalls.
In the US and elsewhere.
Yes, regulatory agencies like the FDA and also independent labs like Valigure flagged this, leading to voluntary recalls by manufacturers for affected lots.
And this links back to things like that AARP article mentioning recalls due to cancer risks.
Exactly. It became a major safety focus, prompting tighter controls and testing for these types of impurities in manufacturing. It's a reminder that even for very old established drugs, ongoing vigilance is critical.
It really is. A wake-up call about continuous monitoring. Okay, finally, let's think about the big picture. Economic impact, cultural aspects, it's huge globally, right?
Economically, its impact is massive. Being an inexpensive, widely available first-line treatment for over 60 years makes it a cornerstone of diabetes management globally, saving healthcare systems vast amounts compared to newer, often more expensive options.
The market must be enormous.
It is. The fact that specialized market research reports exist just for metformin tells you how significant it is economically.
And culturally. Managing diabetes isn't just clinical, is it?
Not at all. Cultural beliefs and practices play a huge role. Providing culturally competent care is so important. There are even communication models designed to help doctors understand a patient's background and beliefs about their illness. Things like ESFT, ethnic learn models.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Some American Indian tribes, for instance, might have specific cultural beliefs about why diabetes occurs, maybe related to external influences or changes in traditional ways, and understanding that can affect how treatment recommendations are received. Some tribal programs actively promote traditional diets as part of diabetes management.
That makes sense. Or managing insulin during fasting periods.
Exactly. Like during Ramadan. People need to adjust their insulin regimens carefully to avoid hypoglycemia while fasting. This often leads to preferring specific types of insulin, like basal and rapid-acting analogs, that fit better with those cultural and religious practices. It's a clear intersection of culture, belief, and medical necessity.
And even the formulation matters. You mentioned a liquid version.
Yes, Railmet ER, the extended-release oral suspension. For people who have difficulty swallowing pills, which could be common in older adults, or people with certain conditions, having a liquid option can make a huge difference in their ability and willingness to take the medication consistently. It addresses a practical barrier that can have cultural dimensions too.
It's truly incredible. A single molecule, discovered almost by accident from a traditional remedy, becomes this global mainstay with such a complex story.
It really is. From folk medicine, through decades of science, regulatory shifts, manufacturing challenges, and now exploring potential new roles in aging and cancer, metformin's journey is far from over.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's a final thought for our listeners to chew on?
Well, maybe consider this. Given metformin's incredibly long history and widespread use, how might research keep surprising us? Will we find completely new uses for it, or will we continue to refine how we use it based on things like genetic profiles or gut microbiome analysis?
Or maybe thinking about the nitrosamine issue. What does that experience tell us about the ongoing challenge of ensuring drug safety and quality, even for medications we think we know inside out after decades of use?
It certainly highlights the dynamic nature of medicine and regulation. And hopefully it underscores the value of being informed and having those good conversations with your healthcare team about what's right for you. Maybe this dive sparks some curiosity to look deeper into the research or even the cultural side of health in your own community.